Hey guys, and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at another Jordan Peterson video. This one he's actually talking to another gentleman about parenting styles and the difference between men and women and why both are actually a vital part of a child growing up. And not necessarily in a nuclear family, but just in a situation where the child is with each parent equal amounts of time. That actually will give your child the best advantage in life. And so that's what this discussion is about. So let's take a look and see if we can learn something, shall we?
Parent who I've seen many of, who is one step behind their ambulatory 2.5-year-old, interfering with absolutely everything he does because he can't grasp a basic principle of socialization. In any case, no has some pain associated with it because otherwise it wouldn't produce tears. And no is a very, very hard thing to learn. And no is what the world teaches, not just what people teach. In any case, back to my wife. She spent the first year bonding with the child and also learning how to respond, essentially, especially in the first 6 months, to his or her every whim, because a crying infant demands instant recourse. And a crying infant is always right, especially if they're under 6 months of age. But then when the kid becomes ambulatory and starts to require discipline, the woman is required to switch from this primarily empathic role, which is facilitated by hormonal transformation post-pregnancy, by the way, from this primarily nurturing role to a role that is in some ways in the local environment, its antithesis. It's very hard for women to do that. And so my observation has been that they require someone else to bolster that element because it runs at counter purposes to what they're required to do in early infancy. And so, so delay of gratification, we're going to focus on that.
And an example illustrating what you're saying, and this is hard data-based example that I talk about in the Boy Crisis, is bedtime. So what we know when we look at bedtimes set by mothers and fathers is that moms will set bedtimes earlier than dads will. Dads will set bedtimes later, but the children end up, when studied, going to bed earlier when they're with the dad than they do with the mom. And so why is that?
That's actually pretty interesting. I almost feel like because I have a 2-year-old daughter, she fights me to go to bed. Like she is tired. She's giving me all the signs of a tired child. It's like she gets super, super energetic and naughty right before bed. It's like this last exertion of just whatever she has to, I guess, avoid going to bed. I don't know, or trying to keep herself up. From what it seems, her dad never complains about her not listening or anything about anything he says. But I see that she challenges me quite a bit. And it's probably because I have given in to her crying and everything since day one. So when Jordan Peterson said before, like at one point you are empathetic and the antithesis of it comes out to be this more sterner person who has to like not respond to all the crying because now they're only crying because they want their way. They're not crying because they need you anymore. And you have to learn the difference between a baby crying and just trying to get you to give in to their way.
Dad will be more likely to do is say some version of like, okay, bedtime is 9 o'clock. And when you get all your chores done, when you get yourself, you brush your teeth, you change your clothes, you've done your homework, etc. And I see your homework and it's done well, then any time that you have between when you're finished, when your sister and brother are both finished, your homework, etc., that time you have to play or do or ask me to do whatever I want, read your favorite story, etc. With mom, she's more likely to, and so the kids end up rushing to get through everything that they need to do. That is postponed gratification in order to get what they want to have. Their story read to them, some roughhousing before bedtime, and something along those lines. And then with the understanding that they will then everything will be cut off at 9 o'clock. The children with mom are more likely to. Mom says bedtime is this time. It's 9:30, let's say, and the children it gets to be 9:30, and one of the boys or kids will say, well, I haven't done my homework, knowing that mom will want the child to have done his or her homework, rather than go to bed without having homework be done. And so so mom will say, well, all right, you should have done your homework before, but we'll allow you a little bit more time for finish your homework off. And so the boy is able to, or girl is able to manipulate more time than that 9:30 time, and stay open even, or stay up even later. What the dad makes clear to the child is that if he or she does not, if they use up all that time and they haven't done the homework, and it's now 9 o'clock your bedtime, sorry, but you will not. You'll just go to school and not have your homework done. That's your responsibility to get that done by this point in time. And so that's one of the sort of dynamics that happens that lead to children being more likely to be focused on doing what they need to do, and also children brought up by mothers are more likely to be ADHD. If they're brought up predominantly by mothers, 30% of children are ADHD. That includes the average between boys and girls. Boys are obviously more likely to be ADHD. Whereas with fathers brought up predominantly by fathers, only 15% are likely to have ADHD. Because
Wow, that's actually very interesting too. I just gotta say that this gentleman here, he's definitely not the same level of speaker as Jordan Peterson. It's almost like he's struggling to get it out. Maybe he's a little nervous on camera or something. And I totally get that. Like, I can talk to you guys this way all day, but in live, it's a little different. Sometimes I get a little word jumbled and I freeze and I don't know what to say. So I totally understand that, but I just was like, wow, quite a difference in dynamic of conversation level. But anyway, what he's saying is actually very important and something that I'm pondering on and making sure that I take note of. Children will manipulate mother because we're more empathetic and we tend to give in, obviously, to the child's needs instead of looking at the more sterner approach, which men tend to have, where it's like rules and responsibilities. If you don't do that, then that's it. Men are a little bit more cutthroat, where with mom, we always leave wiggle room. It's like a situation where if we can learn from that, especially if you are a single mom, so that you're not completely stressed out and run over by your children, that's something to keep in mind. It's okay to be stern with your children and let them know that you can't have your way all the time, and you will need to do what I need you to have done by a certain time. And if you don't, that's it. And we have to stick by our guns too. We can't always make exceptions. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You can see from those examples that the boy or the girl, the children, are required to focus on doing what they need to do, get that homework done, get their teeth brushed, before they get what they want to have. And the same, we talked last time about roughhousing, how the children were prevented from having more roughhousing fun if they pushed their sister or their brother out of the way, and they didn't consider the need. They didn't consider the needs of their brother and sister.
So back to the personality differences. So women are higher in negative emotion, and they're higher in trait agreeableness. And so the way to manipulate someone who's high in negative emotion is to manifest negative emotion and to say, here's a bunch of reasons why I'm not doing so well, and so I deserve a break. And so because of the sensitivity to negative emotion, the fact of the negative emotion is more compelling because it's more deeply felt. And then the agreeableness means that there's a much higher probability of being felt sorry for. And you can see that in the positive light when you're dealing with infants, because when they're in distress, the proper response is immediate gratification of their desires. But that's not a good long-term strategy, which is, I think, likely why, well, I don't exactly understand the relationship with lower agreeableness. It's certainly the reason for the emergence of conscientiousness, which is a cold virtue and which involves delay of gratification. Now, men are not more conscientious than women. They're more industrious to some slight degree and less orderly, and those two combined make conscientiousness. But the agreeableness difference is definitely, it's quite pronounced. And so partly what you're arguing for from the perspective of a personality psychologist is the necessity for two-parent families really on temperamental grounds and really on biological grounds. I mean, these things are mutable to some degree, but not easily. And the other thing that's quite interesting is that, and this is something everyone should really listen to, is that they're anti-mutable given the way that our society is proceeding. So you might say, well, there are these personality differences between men and women, higher neuroticism in women, so that's proclivity to negative emotion, and higher agreeableness. But if we made our societies equal, those personality differences would go away, and then we wouldn't require bigendered parenting.
Yes, the children that seem to do the best are ones that they're in intact families, or as I mentioned before, the children have about an equal amount of time with both parents, and that there is a checks and balance parenting. So a child will come to the mother and say, "Can I climb the tree in the backyard?" And mom will say, "Well, maybe in a few years, sweetie, but not right now. You're too young and you could really hurt yourself." And the child will ask the same thing of a dad, and the dad will be more likely to say, "Well, yes, I guess so, but be careful." And then if the mother finds out, the father and the mother will go, "Well, wait a minute, you're not, blah, blah, blah."
You're playing one against the other here, kid. Good work, but no.
Yes, the kid will play one against the other, but one of the best responses to that is for the child to be able to see the mother and father negotiating.
Right, absolutely.
And saying, well, yes, you can climb the tree, but you can't go beyond this branch this high, and you can't, go on these branches. And Dad, you need to be out there under the tree, so in case the child falls, the child will be cushioned by your fall, and don't get preoccupied with the cell phone. In fact, maybe give me the cell phone while you're out there with Ginger or Mary under the tree. And
so they see the negotiation between masculine and feminine taking place. Why do you think that's so important? And you say there's research supporting that specific proposition. It's a very specific proposition. So what's the research?
Well, it's both specific and metaphorical. Specifically, we now know that children climbing trees makes them worry about what risks are worth taking, what risks aren't. That fires synapses that are outside of their normal synapse firing development. And the data that we have for that is that the IQs of children doing risk-taking behaviors like climbing trees increase as they do that risk-taking behavior, and they increase their psychomotor functioning.
So there's this concept that Russian developmental psychologist came up with, Vygotsky, called the zone of proximal development. And one of the things he noted was that, I believe it was Vygotsky who discovered this, it might not have been, but it's the same phenomenon, so it doesn't really matter. So if you analyze the way that parents talk to children who are developing their language, so infants who are still learning to speak, the adults don't speak to the infant in terms that the infant can understand precisely. The adults speak to the infant slightly ahead of its developmental trajectory. And Vygotsky called that the zone of proximal development, which is the key zone to be in if you're going to learn. So imagine, and I make much of this in my books, that there's a domain that you've already mastered. And so that when you operate in that domain, the things you want to happen. That's the domain of order. And then there's another domain where all hell breaks loose and you don't know what to do. And that's the domain of chaos. But there's an intermediary where you're expanding your zone of competence through exploration. And that's really where consciousness operates.
Definitely a lot to think on. And for me, I'm going to take out of it that giving in to a child's needs all the time is not actually the best for them. In fact, you should look at the parenting styles of men and try to take a little bit after them. And it's not that men are always right, but it's just that obviously children from single parent man homes do a little bit better. We as women, we're not strict enough with our children. We give in too easily, and then when we do handle our children, we do it in a sense of high emotion. And I would say take your emotion out of things for a moment and start looking at things logistically. Make sure you leave me a comment and tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time.